Well, welcome everybody. As you can probably see, one of the benefits of Zoom is my name's at the bottom. I'm Ian Allinson. I'm currently the president of Manchester TUC. So welcome to tonight's meeting, which is our annual general meeting. I'm stepping down from the president role tonight after 2 years, and I want to say what a great honour it's been to be president of Manchester Trades Council, and what a time as well to do it. So we've had the 200th anniversary of Peterloo during those 2 years. We've had the COVID crisis, and we had a general election in between. But I'm delighted to see that we've got John Morgan, who's currently the Vice President and from the National Education Union, that's been playing such an important part in the recent COVID crisis, standing as President. So I know I'll be handing over to good hands. And I want to give huge thanks to John for his support while I've been President, and to the other officers, John Pye, who's been Secretary and Treasurer, Frank Ellis, who's been doing the minutes, Evan Pritchard, who's been our affiliations organiser, and Norma Turner, the Equalities Officer. And thanks to the exec members, whose work is sometimes a bit less visible than the officers with job titles, but includes things like getting out all our communications, a lot of the organising for May Day, working towards the creation of a new People's Centre in the same building occupied by the Mechanics Institute, organising solidarity with disputes, working with the TUC structures, and much, much more. And of course, thanks to the delegates for electing me and putting up with my chairing while getting on with the real business of the Trades Council. This year, in some ways, was a sad one as well, in that we lost Comrade John Clegg, who had been Vice President of the Trades Council and involved with it for many years. I'm sure John Pye will say more about that when we get on to the annual report. I don't want to steal the thunder from John for the annual report, which was emailed out and which John will present shortly, but I do want to make a few remarks about where we are. We've obviously got a huge crisis, a health crisis, a public health crisis, an economic crisis linked with the pandemic. And that's been made so much worse by the callous, incompetent and corrupt government that we have. And at the same time, employers taking advantage, most notably with the tendency to fire and rehire, but also just trying to cut terms and conditions more generally, cutting hours and taking advantage of people. And the current situation is showing more than ever the importance and the need for unions. The efforts of the NEU and Unison have been particularly outstanding in saving thousands of lives by helping get full opening of schools ended and getting onto a more restricted opening. But below that high profile stuff, there's been the work of countless safety reps trying to make their workplaces safer, fighting for better sick pay so that people can actually afford to take time off and isolate when they need to, fighting for jobs and all the rest of the work that the movement's been doing. During those 2 years as well, we've seen a change in the Labour leadership, and one which in my opinion is a big step backwards. And we know that we can't wait for Labour to solve these problems for us. We're going to have to do it for ourselves. But there's a huge gap between the need for trade unions and the reality we've got of sadly so many workers not in a union at all or in poorly organised workplaces. So we've still got a huge job on our hands. Of course, when it comes to that, trades councils aren't exactly the coalface of the trade union movement. You know, we're 2 steps at least away from the workplace where most trade union activism happens, where people go through a branch typically and then get delegated to the Trades Council. But they still play an incredibly important role in organising and promoting solidarity across the movement, in networking people between different unions and workplaces, sharing ideas, experiences and resources, as well, of course, as campaigning. And I think the Trades Council can be incredibly proud that we've kept going over the last year in incredibly difficult circumstances. We actually only missed 1 meeting when the first lockdown hit and adapted very quickly. And it was amazing that we managed to put on what I believe was the only large live May Day event in the country last year. But Trades Councils worked hard at making ourselves relevant. We started the year doing a lot of work to give solidarity with the strikes in the universities, with amongst many other strikes we've supported over the year. The council was quick to decide to back the Black Lives Matter before every employer and Tom, Dick and Harry had decided that was good for their brand. We supported the protests in Manchester for trans rights when those were under attack from the government. And we helped ensure that The friends and families of people who were using mental health services in Manchester got a hearing with Andy Burnham and helped shape what we hope is going to be his policy when the mayoral election happens. But above all, I think the Trades Council's played a vital role in bringing together forces in the fight around COVID. The public meeting we had late last year around the Zero COVID issue brought together people from the People's Assembly, the campaign group, the Zero COVID campaign, the Hazards campaign and others to talk about how we can have a different vision, one that doesn't accept the idea that we have to counterpose lives and livelihoods, but that we can organise to save both. And then the last remark I'd make is that the fights we're having now aren't just about now, they're also about the future. We know that we've got huge problems coming our way with climate change that's going to not just mean we're having to fight to ensure a livable planet, but the impact that the measures that are needed are going to require on workplaces, some expanding, some shrinking, all of them changing in many, many ways. And we know that climate change is one of the contributory factors to having more pandemics more frequently, and therefore getting the right responses in place now and not accepting the government's approach is absolutely vital, not just for COVID, but for what sort of life we have for many years to come. So next I'll move on to the annual report of the Trades Council, which John Pye, the Secretary and Treasurer, is going to present.
So I'll just like to say two things. As Ian mentioned at the start, I'd just like to add my own sort of tribute to John Clegg, an absolute giant. I don't think I knew him personally as well as I would have liked to. From what I did know of him, an incredible person, dedicated, and I can see from the people who I do know who knew him better and worked with him more closely, what an enormous figure he was and how much respect he had from everybody. So very sad that his passing during the year. And then I think it'd be wrong not to record how great appreciation for the work that Ian has put in. I mean, a lot of the other people, as Ian said, a lot of other people have contributed, but Ian, over the past, I think it's 2 years now, has done a tremendous job as president and done so much to lead and make sure that the Trades Council is at the front of tackling all the important issues for trade unionists in the city.
I had been asked or had agreed a few weeks ago to try and get together a kind of balance sheet of the history of the Unemployed Workers Centre project. And I think part of the reason why it was felt that it would be good to have it for this AGM was partly, again, and I don't think John Clegg's name can be mentioned too often, to be honest, was in part as yet another tribute to the work that John did. Unfortunately, I have found it getting something detailed together pretty difficult in that period of time, and I think it does need to be an ongoing piece of work, particularly in terms of doing that balance sheet. Particularly given that although we made a decision, the Trades Council made a decision that the current Unemployed Workers Centre projects, as it was by towards the end of last year, was no longer viable. That it's the current position within the working class, within the with all the attacks that have been made, particularly with the impending growth of mass unemployment, that we would need to revisit this and do it again. So unfortunately, that piece of work is not finished, and I have done a beginning to that work in terms of doing a balance sheet, but I think it's something for the incoming executives to have a look at what I've done and then present something fuller at a future Trades Council meeting. So apologies for that, but again, I think I you know, what I would like to, again, to reiterate is that is that one of the many reasons, apart from the personal tragedy to so many of us, that we have to mourn the loss of John Clegg, is precisely the work that he put in to this really vital project.
We're very glad to have Sharon Graham, who's one of the executive officers of Unite and who's the lead for organising and leverage, who we're hoping is going to be able to speak to us for a few minutes, talk about the role that trades councils can play in supporting workplace organising.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ian. And hello, everybody. Really good to see you. And I'm really pleased that we've managed to get some time, because straight after this, I'm going over to a planning meeting for Amazon. And I no doubt and hopefully will be coming back to you to talk about how we can be involved in that together, because that is going to be one hell of a fight. And not going to talk about it at this moment, but there is going to be some things coming down the track that I think can be very important to push this particular company back. I just want to talk about a couple of things. I know we haven't got very long, and hopefully we can sort of follow on from this, maybe to have some type of a planning session and deeper discussion about how we all are able to move things on in terms of what's happening to workers, but also what we know will happen to communities as a result of COVID. As Ian says, I'm with Unite, and I head up the organising and leverage, particularly part of Unite. And I deal with, you know, the hostile campaigns. I tend to do a lot of the sector organising stuff. So I deal with employers that have moved out of normal business and into a very, very hostile situation. And it won't surprise you to know that during COVID, employers have got far more emboldened. Employers that we have usually never come across my desk, like British Airways, using the crisis, unashamedly using the crisis to do exactly what they wanted to do prior to COVID, but would never have got away with it. Companies like British Airways, who moved to fire and rehire 36,000 workers and bring them back on worse terms and conditions of employment, not because they had to, not because they needed to financially, they had huge amounts of revenue, was because they could, because they get away with it, because furlough was there, people weren't at work, and strike action couldn't be taken. Now, obviously, we have tried to push that back, and some of the worst excesses have been pushed back, but it's really clear that, as it was after the 2008 crash, that employers and the politics are going to make workers pay for this crisis. And we now need to find a way where we push that back collectively. It is absolutely clear that the politics have failed, Westminster has failed, and the only movement now that can really begin to drive this back is the trade union movement and the movement beyond that, in the communities and in a whole host of areas on the left. And we are trying to put in some progressive plans at the moment to see if we can do that across a number of areas at the same time, not just taking one thing and then taking another thing and taking another thing, but really seeing if we can actually have 4 or 5 stake in the ground campaigns happening simultaneously. The other thing that I just want to touch on, which is really, I think, significant for the movement, is how many reps we are either losing through redundancy. I mean, at the moment, it's a huge number that we are seeing being made redundant, and also the reps that are under attack. I deal with, as I say, hostile campaigns for Unite and the negotiations that are around that. And maybe 4 or 5 times a month, a sacked steward situation will come across my desk. Obviously, we mount the campaign. It's either strike action, leverage, or both of those things together to ensure that we can defend our reps, because if you can't defend your reps, you are nothing. And during COVID, I was getting 3 or 4 a day coming across my desks, where employers who were trying to push through things like fire and rehire, trying to push through things like suppression of pay, they were doing that on the basis, if we get rid of the steward, then we have got an open park, if you like, to do exactly what we like. So fear and division, and really get into the skin or under the skin of workers to make them fearful for their job, but also make them feel that the union's impotent and that we cannot defend our members. And that is absolutely critical, that we can show that we can defend our members and that we do that on the front foot and we're not, waiting for something else to happen. The other thing that we're seeing a huge amount of is the whole issue around pay suppression. I am dealing now with a number of companies who fire and rehire one tactic, but even outside fire and rehire, who are looking to suppress pay, again, not because they have to. And I think this is the critical point, that these things do not have to happen. If you take the case of British Airways, there were conversations around temporary measures when profit came back, terms and conditions came back, and they said no, which is why the campaign was launched against them, and why we had to show that we could push back irrespective of whether or not we could take strike action, so direct action and all of those things that people will be well aware of. So I think what's important to say, as we're sort of looking now at how we can create a movement that is separate from what's going on in Westminster, something that is more sustainable, something that we have more control over, in the sense that they are not going to come and do this for us. We are going to have to find a way to defend workers, defend communities, to prevent cuts. And part of that is understanding how we win. I heard, Ian, you talk about Mark coming on from Rolls-Royce Barnoldswick, and the work that those stewards have done, because make no doubt about it, these campaigns are won by reps and members, they're won by nobody else. And the work that they did to defeat what was happening to them, that has a knock-on effect now to other employers who might think twice about doing some of the things that Rolls-Royce intended to do. So it's really important that we understand how we win, that it has to be through action. One of the things that I say a lot when I'm training organisers before a campaign is that weight of argument does not move an employer. If weight of argument moved an employer, we'd win arguments every day of the week. The reality is we have the argument on our side, but we need to have the action, the organisation, the mobilisation. That is in workplaces, yes, of course, that's the bread and butter of what we do, that's absolutely right. But you see things like Barnoldswick, you see things like British Airways, where the community came together to drive that campaign, as well as the industrial wing of the union. And both of those things together, and the leverage on the political, those were the things that created the move, the confidence of the workers, what they did, and also the support that was wider than just what was happening in the workplace. And I think understanding how we win and escalating that as much as we can is really critical. Some of the things that we're talking about currently, and I was actually talking about this just before I came on here this evening, is that the absolute key thing that I think that we need to be doing right now is this critical thing of the fight for jobs. And it's really easy in the huge number of jobs that we're seeing being threatened and going, that, a strongly worded press release goes out and then another strongly worded press release goes out. We need to see that every job is a job that we fight for, that there is a culture of pushing back, putting the stake in the ground and defending jobs. And some of the things that we're trying to do in Unite currently is to look at these campaigns in two ways. So yes, of course, we have the reactive. And as I say, one of the things that I head up is leverage. And this has always been seen as a very type of hostile type of campaigning. You're looking at every part of the company. You are looking at every contract they have, how they make their money, and you are driving them back in a very, very full-on way. And we do those campaigns because we need to do those campaigns in order to win in some circumstances. But we also now need to look at the proactive. There is no point us waiting for these employers to come for us. We have to have a plan across the board. As I say, that is not just around the workplace. That is where we start, and that is the most important priority place. But how do we expand and widen, deepen that collective? And what we're looking at currently, and this, I suppose, Ian, sort of talks to the point you said right at the beginning, that we now need to be working together, is that in Unite, and other unions will have different priorities, and different areas will have different priorities, but we are looking at the 19 sectors where we represent workers, and those areas where workers are not represented. And we're looking at the big beast employers. So Amazon, I spoke about earlier, that is one of them. Ununionised, setting bad behaviour, treating workers in an appalling way. They cannot be left ununion. We cannot let someone else try and do it for us. We have to get in there and do it. So looking at these big employers and making sure that we organise, absolutely, but that we make sure that we are pace setting in those employers good pay and conditions, but also defending our reps and critically defending jobs. We saw in 2008 what happened. I mean, I know there's 38,000 agreements in Unite, and every single negotiation we went into, employers were saying we can't afford it, we can't afford it. We saw cuts in terms of local government, and we cannot allow this time round for that to be repeated. It will be far worse than that if we allow it to go without any pushback at all. We are, as I say, starting in Unite by trying to look at those employers who are doing the worst type of behaviour. We have campaigns like Leverage, which I haven't got time to go through in detail, but I'm more than happy to give people details of it, where we are, not being afraid to have very, very muscular type of campaigns and pushing the employer back. But what we are trying to do now is to extend those campaigns, as I say, into communities, not just for the time period of the campaign, but for the long term, to become in community.
To wind up, please, Sharon.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, because of time, I won't continue on. But the final thing I'd just say is that probably, if I was going to say one comment, now is not the time to batten down the hatches. Now is the time that we come out and fight. And the wider we can do that together, the better chance we'll get of winning. So thanks, everybody. And thanks, Ian, for the invite. We've
got a local dispute brewing at the Queen's Road bus garage, which involves Unite. And we've got here the chair of the branch there, Colin Hayden, and the officer, Lawrence Chapple-Gill, who cover that.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Ian. Obviously, I'm not too sure if you're all aware, it's been a long-running dispute which started back in March, roughly the week before the pandemic really hit bad in this country and the furlough scheme kicked in. So at that point, we had roughly 60 to 70% of the workforce was furloughed, including all the branch committee. I was only rep left in work. Just at the same time, the company was trying to impose massive changes to the terms and conditions of the drivers in the garage. And obviously, we had no way of corresponding with our branch. We're all furloughed, we're all at home. So all the way from March up until June, despite constant pressure, we managed to hold them off. As the restrictions eased in the June time, we were able to hold a consultative meeting in the depot with some of the members, which culminated in a branch meeting on the 19th of July, where it was unanimously voted that the condition that the employer was looking for was far too significant and far too in depth. But they did instruct us to keep negotiating to see there was some efficiencies within the drivers' working parameters that we could share with the company and the employees. From there, the pressure kept coming across. The regional secretary got involved. We spoke with the company, and on the 12th of September, I was suspended from my duties. 2 days later, the company issued a Section 188 on all its driving staff. Now, from that day, every resource at Unite was deployed, and local activist groups. I know the TUC was well involved, the People's Assembly, with loads of solidarity and backing from all over the country, really. And it ended in Sharon and the Leverage team got involved, local politicians, and it culminated in talks resumed. The day I resumed back to work was the 24th of September, and that was when we entered into negotiations with the employer. From that day until December, we were in constant negotiations, but determined that a deal could be struck. However, on Saturday morning, just gone, we were instructed that the company have now withdrew from negotiations, and they've started one-to-one consultations with each of the staff. Now, we've got lots of legal wranglings running around it because we have been denied access to enter into the one-to-one meetings with the staff, and it's created turmoil from Monday morning till today. It's absolute turmoil in the depot. People are coming out saying they're getting threatened with their jobs, they're getting threatened with their rosters, their working pattern. And so, thankfully, due to the resources at Unite's Northwest office, we were able to turn around the industrial action barrack process really quickly. So we got that in motion on Monday, and we received confirmation back from London last night that the industrial action barrack, we served notice on the employer late last night, and obviously the members found out as they woke this morning. The ballot papers will be going in the post from Tuesday. So we just need as much solidarity from the region, from the country, and from everybody involved in the trade union movement, the labour movement, to keep the focus on this depot. to give you a bit of back, this depot has been serving the North Manchester community since 1901. It's been serving passenger transport all the way through for all the years, and the workforce that's went through there are invaluable to the community around it, and they do not deserve to be treated like this. Now, obviously, I'm a bit cautious as to what I can say on a live streaming forum, so one of our regional coordinating officers, Lawrence Chapple-Gill, is on the call, so I'll hand him over to you, and he can say a few words, because possibly he can say a bit more of the stronger stuff that I would like to say, but I'm possibly not in a position to say at this time.
Thanks very much, Colin. And I don't know if you can see the chat, but there's lots of people wishing you solidarity, and on behalf of everybody here, solidarity with that. I recognise lots of faces that I saw, usually with a mask on, taking part in the community blockades outside the bus garage last time they tried to do this, and when they had you suspended. And I'm sure people will give whatever support we can. So hopefully, Lawrence, if I can bring you in now, you can say a bit about practically how people can show that solidarity.
Well, I think thanks, Ian, and thanks everyone. I think Colin has given a really good update and synopsis of where we are and how we've got to where we are. Colin's right. We have spent some considerable amount of time, and we've put in some considerable effort to trying to reach a solution with this company, who have insisted that they need to turn around the depot, they need to turn around the garage, they need to reduce costs. And in the talks that we've had with them, we've actually put forward some suggestions, proposals, and made concessions, which total some £1 million. We've also put up a pay freeze, which equates to £200,000. And that, I think, demonstrates our willingness to try and work with the company to look at those particular areas. We've worked hard, we put a lot of resource in, as Colin has said, but unfortunately, the company, after all this time, after all this effort, and after all this energy, are still now insisting that it's their whole package. It's their whole package that they want us to agree to. And we can't do that. We simply can't do that, because their whole package will involve and will result in things like a 10% reduction in drivers. It will result in a slashing of the sick pay scheme, which, when you consider the environment that we're in with the pandemic and coronavirus, is absolutely astonishing and actually incredibly irresponsible for any employer to be considering that, and will also increase unpaid working. So we cannot and will not agree to that. The company, as Colin has said, has now washed their hands of the talks with us. They've gone it alone. They've tried to sideline us, and they've gone direct to members with this attempt to issue them with ultimatums, which we consider to be intimidating and bullying, and it's part of their fire and rehire approach, which they adopted earlier in the year, which we successfully got a pause to, thanks to the work that our organising leverage department did, which Sharon mentioned earlier. So we've now reached that position. As Colin has said, our immediate response has been to serve notice of industrial action on them. That got served on them last night. And we're now starting the work to make sure that we can win that ballot, maximise the vote, get a massive yes vote, and send a message to what is a hostile and aggressive employer that we're not going to be pushed around in this way. And as was said before, the focus has got to be the reps and the members winning this dispute, because the sort of strong, sustainable workplaces we want to build in the union and across the trade union movement isn't about picking up the phone and calling in the AA or the emergency services. That's about building a strong organised union within the workplace. That's what we're all about in Unite and every other union. And that's about the workplace, and that's the key message. So that's what we're about in the next 2 or 3 weeks, maximising the vote, maximising the yes votes. We're going to be working day and night to do that. There are other tools and weapons in our armoury that we can fall back on if and when we need to. But for the next 2 or 3 weeks, it's all about getting out that industrial action yes vote. So once we do that, Ian, I'm sure we'll be coming back to this body and those who are present tonight and represented tonight to be looking for support and assistance, raising the profile, raising the awareness, the sort of things that Colin talked about before. But that's where we are at the moment, Ian. I hope that's added a bit to what Colin said.
We're having a bit of a Unite Fest at the moment, but I can assure you it's not going to carry on for the whole meeting, but because our next guest speaker is Mark Porter, who's, I think we might call a slightly later stage of a similar campaign to fight against terrible employer actions at Rolls-Royce Barnoldswick. So Mark, if you can give a bit of an update on the progress you've made, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, thanks Ian, and thanks all for the time and inviting me. Just before I kick off, I'd just like to solidarity with all those that are out on strike, be it DHL, UCL, be it Porters at Hartfield Hospital, or any other organisation that's in dispute and about to take industrial action. I put my email address in there. If there's anything you think that we can assist you with, then please do drop me a note and we'll see what assistance we can provide. So, as Ian said, we were out on strike from the 9th of November. The company, Rolls-Royce, on the 26th of August decided that they were going to propose to offshore the majority of our work to our sister plant in Singapore. This is despite insurances given to the workforce 10 years previously, when we agreed to help set up the facility and go over and train the Singaporeans, that this would not be at the expense of our home jobs. And clearly 10 years later, that turned out not to be the case. So we held a consultative ballot where we discussed with the workforce the approach and what they wanted to do. And the reality is that they said that if they didn't stand up and try and fight for their jobs and their livelihoods and their futures, then they'd already lost, regardless of the outcome. So following the consultative ballot, we had a postal ballot, which was returned a 94% in favour of taking industrial action. That industrial action commenced on the 6th of November and lasted for 9 weeks solid, with the targeted action in about 4 different waves, taking various departments out, but it was continuous action. I'm pleased to say that actually on the 8th of January, when we had just as this invite had been sent in the morning, I think, Ian, we finally reached a resolution with the company going forward, and that has been now accepted by the workforce via balloting process, which took place last week. The deal, which includes transition arrangements to new green technologies, including SMRs, climate change technologies such as carbon capture, carbon storage, biofuels for the jet planes, amongst a number of other things, and the setting up of a world-class centre of excellence for training engineers of the future in green technologies going forward. I have to say, I don't think we'd have got to where we got to if it hadn't been for the campaign that was run. And it wasn't just one part of the campaign, it was all component parts. You know, the outstanding support that we had from the local community was crucial to it. The solidarity messages from all over the world and the support from up and down the country and sister unions, as well as it does really help boost the morale of the boys and girls taking industrial action. The social media campaign to break through, because most of us on this call know the difficulty in breaking through and getting the message out of industrial action against the right-wing media. It's not top of their news agenda. And so we embarked on a campaign with social media. And of course, all the assistance that Unite provided us, which was great. And we couldn't have done it without the support of our union. And I know Sharon's on this call. Sharon did quite a lot of work for us in gathering us some information, which was useful. And of course, the political element as well. So it's all aspects of a campaign. And I think the advice I could give to anyone is don't underestimate how much work it is, how much time and effort it takes you, and take any help that's offered to you, because it will all come in, no matter how little or how small you think it is. As Tesco would say, every little does help in this scenario. And I think the one thing I will touch on as well, that we had 100% adherence to the strike action for the whole 9 weeks. And that's no small feat, but we also have in Rolls-Royce our own internal dispute fund that allowed us to top up the strike pay. Asking people to take industrial action is never easy, and nobody wants to take it, least of all employees that are going to lose money. So on the back of furlough and the year that we've just had, where people have been significantly impacted, partners have lost jobs as well as going on reduced money, it was always a difficult thing to do. But the one thing that really helped us was the fact that we could top up the strike money that we received from our union with our own internal dispute fund monies. And so the message that I would have for any large organisation that has a large trade union presence is I would encourage you to seriously look at setting up your own dispute fund, because as an insurance policy, it was the best thing we ever did 7 years ago. It's the first time we've ever used it in anger, but it absolutely served the purpose that it was designed to do. I'll leave it at there and take any questions if anyone's got any, Ian.
Thanks very much, Mark, and congratulations on saving those jobs. That's such an important message that we need to spread out across the movement. We're often very bad at trumpeting our successes, and we need to do that to give people hope and confidence that they can fight back and make a difference as well.
Ed Garner. Yeah, Ed Garner from PCS retired members, and I'm also a Unite community member. Yeah, fantastic words from colleagues there. As regards the fire and rehire, I was looking at that, and of course there was discussions in the House a couple of days ago, where it was merely one of these debates where they just chat about it and don't do anything, and everyone says, oh, it's inappropriate, blah, 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 and then talks about needs of business. So, you know, unless it's unlawful, we can only get so far with that. So we've got to really get some more political will, but as Sharon and everyone there said, it's the action that's needed and planning together. And of course, we've got employers even ignoring health and safety law. And at the moment, yeah, it's kind of anything they can get away with. So we've really got to get all the workforce, you know, everywhere. Just really, they've got to all stand up now any way they can and fight back. Yep.
Great to hear all the speakers today, and fantastic work that Unite and other unions are doing. I guess as I'm here from the Great Manchester Tenants Union, although I'm also active within the Unite community branch, I've got a question which relates to Unite and I guess all the big unions really, and the things we've been hearing about, the campaigns. Obviously the workplace is the site of industrial activism, but we're talking about a kind of what sounds to me like a community organising approach. It's a spectrum of ways of fighting the employer, and you know, building a coalition to kind of overturn these hostile employers and leveraging in different ways from different places, and that's really important. But in Unite, I guess, and all the big unions, not everyone maybe is kind of convinced or understands the importance of these other forms of activism alongside the industrial activism, and how they can support each other. And I wonder if anyone's got any comments on how we can kind of break down those kind of barriers and get people to embrace that more as something that works alongside industrial activism, but is obviously not a replacement for it or anything that can stand up on its own in an industrial dispute.
Thanks, Ian, and congratulations to Mark and the brothers and sisters at Barnoldswick. Great result. I just wanted to say a word about Cheetham Hill, as somebody who, like many people on the call tonight, took part in the community blockades in the autumn. I got an email the other day from Greater Manchester Combined Authority to remind me that there's a consultation still running about what kind of bus service we want in Greater Manchester, doing buses better or something like that, I can't remember. And they obviously anticipate that in various scenarios, but they all would involve a franchising system whereby Greater Manchester gets control of its buses again and contracts with operators. Now, it seems to me that in this political situation, it's an ideal opportunity for Labour leaders in this area, I'm thinking Richard Rees and all the other leaders, and I'm thinking particularly Andy Burnham, to get a grip on the situation and explain to some of these rogue employers that firing and rehiring is not acceptable. And if you want a contract with this city public transport, then you're going to have to behave, and we're not going to have a race to the bottom in Greater Manchester. I hope if there's any Labour Party members or Labour councillors on the call, they might be able to make some of those points to senior Labour figures in the area.
Yeah, I mean, I endorse the question that Ben asked before about community organising. But one thing, I put something in the chat before about a personal experience that I've had where I work on a 0-hour contract, and I'm interested in the question of union recruitment, because the thing is, it seems to me that the victory at Barnoldswick and the ongoing struggle at the bus depot together, and I don't want to preempt our next speaker, but I will mention obviously the great work that the NEU has done over the issue of schools reopening. That these things are all these things should all be used as a way of encouraging more people to join a trade union, and I'd be interested to hear what the various speakers have to say, if anything, on the issue of how do we go about recruiting people to getting more people to join, more workers to join trade unions. I'm a Unite member, and I know that, as Ian has said, it is a bit of a Unite fest, and I'm not, as a Trades Council officer, I'm speaking with that hat on, so I'm not particularly bothered which union people join, that they join the most appropriate one. But I think it would be useful, I think, to have a comment about that from some of the speakers. And as far as, and just to say, I think I speak for everybody here, as far as the struggle at North West Buses is concerned, I'm raring to go in terms of any kind of work, solidarity work, leverage work, whatever you want to call it, that our comrades, our brothers and sisters at Queen's Road require. So, and obviously Lawrence is absolutely right. It's got to be the first and foremost. It's the job for the workers there and their reps. But there are many of us raring to go if we are needed to provide any kind of solidarity.
Great. So I was just coming in on Evan's point, and happy to come in on any others, but I think Colin's going to come in on the one previously about people joining unions, because I think it's really an important piece. Because the reason that I, sort of talk a bit about the batten down the hatches thing is that, in the past, sometimes when workers are facing this type of crisis, unions can almost try to survive, basically, just hope the bloody thing will go away and try to survive. And this is definitely not the time, if there ever is a time, to do that. And the conversation that we've been having, and it's because we see it happening, is that the best way to recruit members into the union is by action. When we did the British Airways dispute and we were able to push back the fire and rehire, and take away some of the worst parts of it, over 2,000 people joined the union just from British Airways, bearing in mind it was heavily organised in the first place. 106,000 people have joined Unite since the lockdown in March. And for me, that's not because we've got stress balls or any other silly gimmicks that sometimes that unions use. The only way and the best way to bring people into unions is if we show we can defend workers and we can defend jobs. So I've got a much longer answer, but Ian will kill me if I keep going on. But I do think that the message has to be, we have to defend and we have to push. And if we do that, people will see us as the vehicle for change.
No, I just wanted to say I agreed with what Paul Gerrard had said earlier over it. This is the time we should be fighting it all. we've had several meetings along with Colin and myself and several others and Unite officers. We've had several meetings with Andy Burnham about the franchising and about the way we'd like to see it to go. But as regards to what's happening at Queen's Road, as you know, I work for another bus company in Manchester, and I think we need to be fighting every inch of the way with our brothers and sisters at Queen's Road, because if these buggers are allowed to get away with what they're trying to do, it'll come down on all the other companies. They'll pick them off one by one, the smaller companies to start with, but it will eventually go for the other big company in Manchester. And we all need to be standing together. I mean, everyone from all the different bus companies, all the bus depots. What they're trying to do now is just atrocious. And what bothers me is we've got a new MD now, who's someone, he's come from, I can't think of his bloody name, he's come from the airport. Lawrence will probably know him, but we believe he's been sent in to do a job of work similar to what's gone on, or trying to go on at Queen's. So we need to fight this every inch of the way. And if Colin needs me to do anything, I will do. I'll be more than happy to speak to the other councillors in Manchester and try and muster some support through them. Thank you.
I just wanted to say to everyone who's in struggle, we've got absolute solidarity from my branch, but specifically to the Barnoldswick team, we've got a couple of new reps, one of which is being bullied ruthlessly by his management team, and you will not believe the confidence it's given him to follow your actions on Facebook. It's been a real game changer for him. He understands the idea of trade unions, but to actually see it in action and it work and deliver for workers, he understands now, and it's now imprinted in him. He's got it. He'll never put it down. He'll be waving that Unite flag all the way. And we've got some serious stuff coming at us in the near future. We've got a pay dispute and stuff like that. But he's a frontline guy, cleaning COVID positive wards, and challenging management about quality of PPE, about working standards, about working hours. And it's given him that confidence to have a voice. And the clinical staff around him see that voice. They see that guy who's just a cleaner. It's just a cleaner. He's only band 2, but he's not only band 2. He stood up with his finger almost on the nose of that manager, telling him, no, that's wrong. And a lot of that confidence has come about because he's seen what solidarity and what being one unit, one voice, speaking with one voice has done. And also the brothers and sisters in the NEU, using the Section 44, absolutely brilliant. Our staff are in that same situation, but they understand that. And right around the corner from us, we've got all the care staff. They're massively unorganised. They've got to be the focus next.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Well, I'm glad that we've done some and helped inspire some of the younger generation. I know you didn't mean it this way, John, but he's not just a cleaner. He's actually the backbone of our society. And the sooner the government recognise that and start paying him a decent living wage, the better we'll all be on that. Just echoing Sharon's point in response to Evan about recruitment community. On a personal level, we don't have that problem because we are highly organised and we are 99.9% organised. But I think just touching on Sharon's point, it's actually, you've got to give them a reason to join the union. And Sharon's right about industrial, about fighting for workers' rights and standing up for them in the district. Because a lot of people do join when they are in distress. But unions are a force for good. They do a lot of good other work, community work. If anyone that followed our campaign, just normal stuff that we're doing day out with charity stuff and likes. And I don't think we promote the other aspects of it enough as a movement, to be honest with you. And perhaps that's why we struggle in some occasions. There's an old stereotypical view held by some of the unions, and the movement has evolved. It's moved on, and so I guess promoting some of the other aspects of what the unions do, of which there are many, be it education, be it standing up, will be a great way to demonstrate about why people should join the union. And just touching on, if ever any more proof was needed that we are relevant, then I would encourage them to look at our dispute. We're a site closing, without a union, without that backing in there, then I don't think I'll be talking to you tonight saying that I'm pleased to announce that we've secured a long-term future for the site.
So I want to bring in Daniel Kebede, who's Vice President of National Education Union. And if there was ever an example of a union that has shown how much you can recruit by taking a stand, I think the NEU is probably winning that prize in the last few months. Certainly, I'm sure, like many of you, on that amazing meeting the other week with 100,000 people in a union meeting, and apparently 400,000 people who joined at some point. Absolutely amazing work, and it's definitely saved lives. So over to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you very much, Manchester TUC, for having me here, and thanks very much, John, as well, Manchester NEU, for the invite. Firstly, I just want to say, big solidarity from the NEU to those workers in struggle. Whether you're striking in a bus depot, Barnoldswick, Rolls-Royce, or indeed our comrades in the GMB fighting fire and rehire. The only thing that can really protect us as workers, as it's already been said this evening, is organised trade unions in the workplace. And we had over 1,800 people die today. It's a horrific figure in all our view. We should all be sickened by this government and the way they've mishandled this crisis. But I was thinking, actually, while I was listening to some of the speakers, I drifted off in my mind. When you think of people dying today, they've had a couple of weeks, 3 weeks of being sick. I think it's 21 days, and then they would have had to have caught it and incubate it, and it would have had to have incubated. People dying today would have got sick last half term. They'd have got sick that last week of Christmas when we were saying, please close the schools. It's getting out of control. The rocketing death rate is because the government hasn't listened to us. And it's not listened to any trade union, but it's not listened to us in schools and in the NEU. And it didn't have to be this way. It did not have to be this way. We want children in school. That is the best place for them, but it has to be safe. And we put forward plan after plan to get schools open safely after the lockdown in September and keep them open safely. We wanted and demanded Nightingale classrooms so that we could shrink class sizes and reduce social mixing, a mobilisation of the supply staff so that we could staff the classrooms and shrink those classrooms. We wanted a plan B for blended learning that was agreed, so the shift to online was easy, and we really wanted Wi-Fi and laptops provided for children in need. Each stage, the government has just ignored us, absolutely ignored us. We've appealed for circuit breakers, ignored. We called for the schools to shut a week early, ignored at Christmas, and we was ignored. The government has consistently tried to do education in this pandemic on the cheap, and we basically got to a point where we had to say enough was enough, and we had to assert our right for our health and safety. And that really, the tipping point there was really on the 22nd of December. The government had been really keeping lids on the science and what they make available to us. We've been really grateful to Independent Sage. But on the 22nd of December, the government's own scientists were saying that to bring down transmission, to bring down the viral rate, you need to close schools. And the consistent government mantra has been schools are safe, schools are safe. And that is, for a child who has got no underlying conditions, it is minimal risk for that child. But children live in families, they live in wider communities, they live in support bubbles with people who've got critically vulnerable people in. But it's not just our children who can spread it to the rest of the community. We have members of staff in our schools, a variety. It's rich and diverse, our school staff teams. And the governments have been consistently saying schools are safe, and they've even been saying if a teacher has no more risk of dying from COVID than any other professional. But what they have been suppressing is that teachers are at multiple times more risk of catching COVID. And yesterday, the Department of Health have released some data, and we've been able to track what those infection rates are. You're twice as more likely to get it if you're a primary teacher or a secondary school teacher. You're more than twice as likely to get it if you're a special needs teacher. And for our support staff, who are often the heartbeat of our schools, often on the lowest paid, the predominantly female workforce, they are multiple times, 4 times in a special school, 4 times more likely to catch COVID-19. The government has treated our profession with complete disregard, but not only our profession, our wider communities as well. So following the announcement on the 22nd December, we were left with the choice as a trade union. We can either do that thing that Sharon mentioned about, just hoping it'll all go away, or we can take a stand and we can fight. And it was a huge risk. It was a huge risk. I remember seeing the paper, the strategy paper, and the officers get to view it before the executive. And I was excited by it. But I was also a bit nervous because I know it was the right thing to do. And I felt like the exec thought it would be the right thing to do. But there's always that risk. Are we not gauging the mood of our members right? And we launched it got agreed by the executive, the strategy, and we had that Zoom call announced. And I remember speaking to other officers the morning of the Zoom call, I think it was on the Sunday, and 28,000 people registered. I was like, wow, that's huge. We had a 20,000 Zoom call at the start of the pandemic. That 28,000 turned into being 100,000. We had 50,000 on the Zoom call, and then 50,000 watching through YouTube, through Facebook, and through Twitter. And the final analytics were that there were 400,000 different devices dial into that meeting over the period, some coming in, some coming out, but 100,000 consistently. It was quite something, but of course it was that last resort. And I live in an area where there is a diverse range of unions representing education workers. We are very pleased to have Unison with us and the heads unions. And it was just really quite phenomenal. We had 40 schools around me, primary schools. We had members of staff issue Section 44s and were forced to shift to remote learning just in County Durham. 40 schools in Walsall, 40 schools in Birmingham, 50 across Norfolk. Traditionally, our best area has always been London. These areas, sometimes, we've not felt like, there's been a need to develop our organising around them. But what we saw was members who weren't necessarily the most active or active at all in the beginning, not only assert their own personal right for a safe and healthy working environment, but also collectivise with their colleagues. Many would sign the Section 44s collectively and issue them. And just to give you like an idea of the scale of this, in a local school to mine, another union had advised their members not to do the Section 44 and advised that they face disciplinary. This woman, she didn't only just leave that union, join the NEU, she became a rep overnight. She organised her colleagues, and that whole school signed the Section 44 and it shifted to remote learning. It was really something quite phenomenal. And what we've seen is that since the 1st of January 2021, that we've had 21,000 new members join the NEU. It's been quite phenomenal. And that's on top of the tens of thousands that have joined throughout this pandemic. So it is very clear, if you are a union that is prepared to stand and fight and collectivise and organise and assert your rights, as a trade union, you will grow. That is for certain. But the struggles aren't over, are they? They're not. They're far from it. We're going to have a battle on around school safety. There's already the hints of what's going on. You know, we're going to open up regionally. We're going to make sure, you know, we're going to look to open them up as soon as possible. You know, they're behind on the vaccine rollout. They've not invested any money. There is going to have to be a serious discussion about how schools go back when they do. But also, we still have big challenges around early years. The government is still refusing to shift early years settings onto to reduce numbers, and the same with special schools. So we still have these struggles ahead. But of course, as well, at the centre of all of this is our children. And I just do want to finish by mentioning this. The government have consistently failed them through this crisis. They failed to get them laptops. They failed to get them Wi-Fi. They're cutting the £20 uplift in universal credit. We had 4 million children in poverty in 2019. It was expected to hit 5 million in 2020 prior to the pandemic. We've got a 20% shrink in the economy. Child poverty is expected to rocket, and it is a job for us as trade unionists, educators and workers to be the voice for those children. So not only do we need to oppose the scrupulous employers, oppose this cruel government, but we've got to be the defenders of the next generation, because our children deserve a better deal. So thank you very much, Ian, and thank you very much, Manchester TUC.
And thank you very much, Daniel, and to the NEU for the sterling work you've been doing. And, you know, you're not just defending yourselves, defending the children, defending the community, as you say. And I think we all recognise there's a link as well. The government's determination to pack out schools is very much linked to their determination to keep unsafe and non-essential workplaces open, putting the community at risk for the sake of profit across industry after industry after industry. And every time you take a stand to stop the cramming of kids, particularly in poorer areas, into classrooms, that's undoubtedly saving lives and helping close down overcrowded workplaces elsewhere. And if only we had, for everybody, getting full pay when they need to have sick leave and isolation and parental leave, you know, because people are being expected to juggle childcare alongside, you know, full-time jobs working from home, or juggling going into work. And childcare and education are jobs, aren't they? Not just things that you squeeze in alongside something else. So incredibly powerful stuff.
Yeah, thank you for that, Daniel. That was really good. I've been involved in a lot of these meetings. What I'm concerned about is, we brought this up with, I sit on the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee, is that some of our schools are half and 2/3 full. The reason for this being that the government this time gave out a list of key workers that's as long as your arm, quite frankly. And last time it had to be 2 key workers, not just one. And so people are being forced into work. You can tell by the amount of traffic that's on the road that this is more of a mockdown than a lockdown, which explains why the deaths are as high as they are today, you know, the highest ever, 1,800. And we really need to force the numbers down. I really don't see schools going back completely until the earliest after Easter. But as you've already said, the government is trying to push regions to come back a little bit at a time. And I think we need to fight that off. We need to say, no, we're not going back. It's not going to be safe. We're asking for, with NEU, NASUWT was my previous union, and the UCU, we're asking for vaccinations for all teachers. So my daughter's a secondary school teacher. She's working from home. I had to fight for that in a different authority than mine. The head was forcing them to go into an empty classroom and to teach online from the classroom, just for the sake of power. And so basically you've got caretakers opening rooms that don't need to be open. You've got catering staff that shouldn't be working. And, you know, all because these head teachers have got this idea that you can't, you know, it's lack of trust, basically. My daughter's working way over the hours she should be working at home. I'm working at college hours. Our college said, and the university in Bolton where I work said, you're not allowed on the premises. We don't want to see anybody. If you need to pick anything up, you have to come at a certain time. And that's the way it should be for everyone. It should be like that. It shouldn't have to fight for this. And my daughter's, the other daughter's a primary school. Sorry, my dog's running around like an idiot. In the primary school, basically they're working in shifts. And so they're only going in when they need to go in, and they've got small numbers, which is the way it should be. But some of the schools, as I say, are full, 2/3 full, half full, even nearly to full to capacity. And so therefore they're not shut at all. And we need to fight that, and we need to say, no, there should be a maximum number in each school. And then on the other side of this, you've got people at home. I've got students who are trying to juggle kids' education. They've got no resources. They've got no digital access. They've got no Wi-Fi. Got very little access to any devices, and they're really struggling with that too. And then the other strand is about nurseries that have had to be kept open, when nursery staff are really scared and really worried about the death rate. So I just think there's so much to do, you know, and I know so much has been done, but we need to carry on fighting.
Yeah, I'm Fiona. I'm from UCU here in Manchester. So I just want to say that it's been really inspiring listening to all the guest speakers in Struggle. About a year ago, we were in UCU in the middle of a very big national dispute and out on strike. And I just want to echo some of the points that the Unite comrades have made earlier about the importance of solidarity and importance of different trade union solidarity and community solidarity. And obviously from our aspect, obviously we have the students and the student solidarity and how important those things were to us. And obviously to offer certainly our support from the local UCU branch in terms of supporting any disputes that are ongoing in the local area, that would be really important. I think in particular listening to the NEU and what the NEU have been doing, obviously given that that's kind of a key aspect of our work at the moment, is the potential for us to have to go back to face-to-face teaching. And obviously at the moment, you know, the government guidance is that we shouldn't just yet, but it's kind of always on there on the cards, isn't it? Like it is it for you in schools? And this idea of taking a sort of national approach, I think has been really, really important, having a mass call, a mass meeting. And it's something that, you know, I would like us to see in UCU to go forward on that, and to have that kind of coordinated approach in terms of giving advice and going forward on that case. I have a kind of question really for Daniel from the NEU really. Is looking at the prospects for industrial action. You know, obviously you were doing the kind of Section 44 approach, which has been successful. You push the government back. You know, I mean, the government can kind of pretend it was sudden overnight scientific advice that they suddenly looked at and they went, oh, okay, we changed our mind. But obviously, we all know that it was a fact that you organised a great pushback there from members. But the kind of, I suppose, kind of going forward, I'm thinking of like, is there going to be a need to push towards industrial action for a return and these kind of things, and other sorts of things on the cards? And you know, kind of any support we can kind of give from the UCU, I guess, as well, in terms of doing those things would be great. I mean, we'd definitely be up for that, but definitely how we're kind of looking and learning at those things. And certainly the other side of our kind of work at the moment is not so much in Manchester, but certainly nationally, is the prospects for redundancies, which kind of goes back to some of what Unite people were saying earlier. Having some more and more universities coming forward in the pandemic threatening redundancies. We've just heard from Leeds, we've heard from Leicester and other universities, and you know, Goldsmiths are in dispute at the moment about similar issues. So we're kind of having this two-pronged approach, and we're kind of, I think, learning so much from the different trade union disputes that are going on. But I think one of the key things going forward is going to be about trying to coordinate action wherever we can, where we're having these similar disputes, getting together the different unions, you know, going across those kind of those traditional kind of union boundaries and getting together, not just learning from each other, but actually trying to maybe coordinate action together on those issues. And the key issues at the moment, we're seeing redundancy battles all around the country. We're seeing fire and rehire being used, and we're seeing health and safety issues. And I think if we can try and find some ways to work together and get together, I think that'll be a great step forward for us in pushing back this government. We've always seen so many U-turns from the government so far. There's potential there to push back on that, and also push back against employers.
One of the other local disputes going on, of course, with British Gas, is a national strike going on at the moment, and there's picket lines in Stockport. Posted details in the chat box, and there's a strike fund there as well, so I'd encourage people to support that.
Firstly, right, I'm an executive council member for Unite, representing the London and Eastern region. First of all, thanks, Ian. This has been a wonderfully educational and inspiring meeting, due in no small part to the speakers that you have had. particularly the speakers that are providing a lead to their fellow workers in pushing back the employers. But also when it comes specifically to Daniel, I have been amazed. I'm a lorry driver by trade. I am not IT empathetic. I am a bit of an e-dinosaur. This year has been a remarkable learning curve for me and for the trades union movement, I think, in how social media and e-media can be used to organise. So some specific points. The NEU meeting, I think, blew the minds of a lot of experienced activists when we realised the potential that hadn't even crossed our minds before of reinstating the tradition of mass meetings in the British Labour movement on a scale that, frankly, hadn't crossed my mind. So specifically, Colin has unfortunately left, but perhaps you could propose this to him. The delegates from passenger transport at the London Regional Committee today raised the Go Northern dispute and pointed out this affects workers in passenger transport, not just in Manchester, not just in Go Ahead, every bus driver in the company. We are facing the very stark choice now that public transport can either be run for profit or it can be run safely. It can't be run both. And this government seems determined on the choice that it's going to make. So perhaps you could suggest to Colin that if he were to push Unite into convening a meeting for all passenger transport reps across the countries and regions to discuss the threat posed at Go Northern, not only would that hopefully inspire practical solidarity instead of just fine words from EC members where it means nothing, it generates a wider knowledge of it, and I suspect it might actually scare a little bit the bosses of Go Ahead when they realise what they have potentially unleashed. That's the first thing. The second thing is a tribute to, I suppose, Manchester Trades Council for also realising that the purpose of a Trades Council is to generate action. It's not a meeting shop, a talking shop where people tell the good old stories about the good old days. And for that also, Ian, Trades Councils up and down the country are aware of that, but you're demonstrating it in practice. I'm going to shut up now and read some of the stuff that's going on in the chat. But from the London and Eastern region, both to your Trades Council and to the workers in dispute in your region, solidarity and thank you for inviting me.
Just reiterate again about what Ian and myself have both said about affiliation. The other thing is reiterate something I also put in the chat to give a plug for the campaign to stop the government from taking away the uplift, the £20 a week uplift to universal credits claimants. Can everybody please spread the word about that far and wide? It's a winnable campaign. It could be another U-turn that this government makes, and that £20 a week is making a massive difference to the lives of a lot of people, and taking it away will be an incredible blow to millions of poorest people, poorest working class people in our society, including people in work.
Yeah, it's just something Julie's just showed me now. It's just something that's come up. And if you just indulge me, I'll just read it. It's only very short. If anyone going away, read on. My son works in Tesco Stretford. His manager, age 56, was found dead in bed after just 2 days feeling off colour. It was COVID, even though she was vigilant with masks and sanitizer. Staff were tested and approximately 50 were positive. The store was shut down. Please be patient with our shop workers. It just proves what our shop workers and front-facing staff are up against.
Thanks for that, John. And I absolutely agree. I mean, the only times I really venture out of the house is to do a weekly shop, and I'm always absolutely, try to be the politest person in the world to the shop staff, because I understand how stressful it must be for them to be there all day. Certainly when they get some, characters who come through and treat them disrespectfully, and it must be really worrying for them. So I was aware of that, and it's very worrying when you see, a large shop like that serving Trafford, etc., a large community for 50 members of staff to have come down with that with COVID is really, really shocking. First of all, I'd just like to say it's a privilege to have been elected as president of Manchester Trades Council. We were going to try and jazz it up a little bit, but apparently some other fellow was getting made president this afternoon, so J-Lo and Lady Gaga weren't available. I'd like to thank Ian. He's been an absolutely amazing president over the last year. We are going to really have to work together, which I think is a good thing, just to replicate what Ian's done on his own. It will force us into coming up with good systems to work together and share the responsibility. Ian's had an horrific year, if you think of it in terms of what happened over the last 12 months. There have been so many struggles. We've heard tonight great speeches and information from comrades involved in disputes, the buses dispute, Barnoldswick. We've had UCU out on strike. We had NEU sixth forms out on strike earlier in the year. But of course, that was just a tiny fraction of it. Ian has managed to steer everything through the Black Lives Matters protests, which are not over. Those issues have not been fixed by any chance. COVID, climate change, just, some people seem to think climate change has disappeared, but it hasn't, and it's going to have a massive impact on our economy and on jobs. And Ian has done brilliantly throughout the whole year and the year before that. So I'd just really like to thank him. All those things are still to come, so we're going to have to really be vigilant. We've got Brexit as well. I don't want to, please don't think I'm going to reopen the Brexit debate, but I think we'd all agree that some of the Tory party might use that to try and attack our employment rights. And we're going to have that fight on our hands this year as well. I don't want to sort of harp on too much about the NEU. I thank Daniel for his amazing speech before. But I would just like to give a relevant local example of what has happened when a trade union stands up for its members, gives good advice that they can stand by, and goes and supports them. In the early months of COVID, I think over the course of about a week, we got nationally 10,000 new members and something like 300 new reps across the country. We've continued to recruit throughout the year because our members have trusted us, and other workers have seen that they can trust us, and they've come and joined us. So when we arrived back after Christmas, we got some figures here in Manchester. Manchester NEU had gained nearly 300 members. In 1 week, we got 7 new reps at 7 different schools. That is not just me bragging, because at a time when 1,800 people are dying in one day, I don't think it's a time for bragging. But I think the purpose of us here tonight is to talk about trade unions and how we can use trade unions to defend ourselves, our employment, our livelihoods, and our communities. And I think it's a fantastic example of how, if you stand up and do the right thing, you can organise. And I think that's what we need to sort of take forward into 2021, this absolute need to organise in the workplace. We've got a whole generation of youngsters who are not necessarily going to run out and join a union as their first thought when they start working. We have to inspire them. We already are doing, because I'm seeing some amazing youngsters joining unions and getting involved in disputes and organising in the workplace and in workplaces where there's never been a union before. But we've really, really got to hammer that home and get that new generation into the trade union movement, into the labour movement. I think if we look, and again, this has been said before, but I am going to just come back and finish with one example. If we look at the example of our colleague and comrade, John Clegg, who sadly passed away, as you've heard. John was an amazing man. He was a gentleman. He was a great man just to sit and have a cup of coffee or a pint with. And he had an amazing effect in the city of Manchester by standing by what he believed in and never, ever giving up on that. He worked with communities across the city. He organised, as people know, with the LGBT community. He was a Labour councillor. He was an officer here with MTUC. And I certainly, as president, will be using John's example of calmly and quietly not giving up and continuing with what I believe in and trying to persuade people of there is a better way out there that we should all be following. And I think Manchester Trades Council's job in 2021 will be to help unite all the different parts of the labour movement in the city, if we can do, and give them that space to be able to debate and to resist and to stand up for themselves. And we'll continue doing that because we've got a fantastic team here at MTUC. Please, if you're not a delegate tonight and you've been here and you've enjoyed the meeting, as I said, go back to your branch, ask can you affiliate, and then join as a delegate. So as I was saying, I think in 2021, that's what we'll try to do. We need your help. We've got an amazing set of people working here at MTUC on a voluntary basis, but we can always use more. Please get involved. If you're not in a union already, I'm sure you all are here tonight, go out and evangelise, get people to join their union. And tonight, that's enough. I think we need to go out and we need to take stock of all the good things we've done over the last year. And as bleak as things can be sometimes, we know we are right. We know we can win. Solidarity.